This video is to show you how to make an object fire in the direction it's facing. We're essentially going to animate a tank that we'll get the original GIF and we'll rotate it through 360 degrees, and using the arrow keys we'll move it in a right or a left rotation, and then use the up and down keys to move it forwards or backwards, and depending on the direction, when we hit the space bar, we'll be able to fire a bullet in the direction that the tank is facing. So let's first of all load our sprites. So I'm going to do a right click and I'm going to create a sprite. I'll call this sprite tank. There are a total of 3 sprites I'm going to use in this. There's the main tank when I open that. Now I'm going to click on the center here. We should be in advanced mode in GameMaker. I'm going to click on the center there and center that image, or find the center of the image, so that when I do the rotation it will rotate around that point. When I click on edit sprite, you can see that there's only one sprite in the image. What I'll do to make a multiple set of animations is I'm going to animate, and I'm going to go to a rotation sequence. I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise, which is the direction that GameMaker tracks its degrees in. And at the moment the tank is actually facing 0 degrees, and I click on counterclockwise. I'll rotate it through 36 frames, giving a total of 360 degrees. That is, each frame will take the tank through 10 degrees. Now I could make it 360 degrees, but that does make it rather slow and a bit more tedious. It does give you a lot finer control, but for the moment we'll leave that at 36 and go OK. And you can see that automatically GameMaker has rotated my image. When I click on Shoot Preview, you can see the tank rotating. It's rotating quite fast. That's fine. I could have made it 72, but I'm happy with that for the moment. And I'll click on that, save the changes, and go OK. Now I'll load up the other sprites. I'll create the wall. The wall is really just going to be something to contain within the room. It can be visible or invisible. It will be a solid object in this instance. And go open, and I'll go OK. I can deselect transparent if I like, but I'm happy with that. And the last sprite I'm going to make is the bullet. You'll see that I'm naming the sprites as I go along. I find that that's a much more efficient way to do things. I'll also center the bullet so that when I fire it out of the tank, it can fire from the center of the tank, and you'll see why that's a bit useful later on. So we'll go OK at this point. Now I've created the 3 objects and now 3 sprites. Now I'm going to create some objects. I'll just delete that one. So if I do a right click on my objects, I'll create the object. The first object I'm going to make is my wall, just to get it out of the way. I'll give my sprite wall. I'm going to make it solid so that I can do things like bounce off it, or if I collide with solid objects, I can make it invisible if I want to have boundaries that are not visible that can be bounced off, but we'll just leave it like that for the moment and go OK. The next object I'm going to create is the bullet. At the moment I'm not going to do anything with the bullet. We'll come back to that later. I'm just simply going to create the object bullet so that I have got that object made, ready to go, ready to deal with later on. And the last one I'm going to create is the object tank. Now this is where all my work gets done for the moment. I'll give it my object tank. It's not solid. it is visible, and I'll go OK. Later on we're going to give the bullet a depth, which will put it behind the tank, but we've got our tank sitting there ready to go. Now the tank's going to have a couple of other things. I'm going to add some variables in this tank. I'm going to add a variable called speed, which will set the speed of the tank, and I'm going to add a variable called direction. Let's add each of those. So when the tank's created, we want a create event, so that when the tank is created, we can set these variables at that point. The first variable is speed. I'll set it at 0 for the moment. It's not relative, it's just set at 0. And my next variable will be direction. And again, that's not variable, it's just go OK. So we've created our variables in the initial section. So when the tank is created, it has a variable of speed of 0 and it has a direction of 0. In other words, it's facing the same direction. The first thing I'm going to do is add some keyboard events, which will make my tank move backwards and forwards using my arrows. So I'll click on Add Event and I'm going to add a keyboard event. Let's choose the left key, choose left, and when I click on the left key, I want my variable called direction to go back 10 degrees. And I've chosen 10 degrees because if you remember back at the start with the sprite tank, the actual tank had 36 images, each going 10 degrees. 36 times 10 is the 360, that's the rotation of the tank. Next event I'm going to add is my right keyboard event, and again same thing. I'll grab my variable, I'm going to call it direction, and this time I'm going to go back in 10 degrees, and I'm going to make it relative, which I did forget to do with the left. So I'll go back into my left, set my variable speed and set it relative. And what relative does is that when I hold the key down, it adds 10 degrees, then adds another 10 degrees, or adds another, subtracts 10 degrees, subtracts. So I'll go minus 10, minus 20, minus 30, minus 40, and keep on rotating around as I hold the left key down. There's one other important event here, and it's a little bit of code that sits behind the tank. To add code, we're going to use what's called a step event. So I'd like you to click on Add Event and choose the event called Step Event. And we'll just choose the step, no begin step, no end step. Now, in the Control tab, which is the fourth one down, which is the same one I'm in, there's a section there called Code, and it says Execute some code. I'll drag that into there, and I'm going to put in some code here. Now, the code I'm going to type is image angle, which is a set piece of code from within GameMaker, and I'm going to set that to the direction. And direction is one of my variables. I'm also going to say image speed, which is another GameMaker piece of code, is equal to 0. Now what that does is it says set the angle of my image to the direction that I finally end up facing, and set the speed of that rotating image to 0 so that it stops rotating. And we'll close that. Now if you were using GameMaker Lite, those directions would actually look quite different from that. They would look like this. image index equals direction times image number divided by 360, because GameMaker Lite does not have the image angle as a settable item, but so you have to use the image index, which takes the index of the image off the rotating sprite and sets it based on what image you're actually doing it. Let's go back to where we were though. Image angle equals direction and the image speed 0. I'm going to click on that. Go, beautiful. It's got my piece of code in there and we're ready to go. We could probably start to actually test this at this stage. So I'm going to go OK for the moment. I'm not going to go left, right, backwards, forwards or anything at the moment. I'm just going to go OK. I will make a room. I'll create a room. And there's my room. Now, typically what I do with rooms is my images, my sprite wall is if I open it, it's 32 by 32. So to make my life easier, I'm going to snap this to 32 by 32 and I'll choose my object wall, and I click on it, I can place my wall in. If I hold the shift button down, I can just simply drag all the way around. Now these objects, these items are visible, they can be invisible, and I will probably tell my tank to bounce off the wall, off the objects. So I'll put my tank in the room first. For the moment I'm not worried about bouncing off the wall, I'll come back to that. Just pop a tank in there. Let's test this room, see if the tank does do the left right turning thing. Yes left, yes right, and that's it. That's perfect. It's turning left and it's turning right. That's exactly what I want it to do. Okay, we'll come back to where we are. Big black screen. Let's now, I'll close my room down for the moment and save the changes. Yeah, okay, I don't know what they are, but we'll have a guess at, say there's some there. I'll go back to my object tank and I'm going to add one more event. I'm going to add a collision event with the object wall, and I'm going to say when you hit the wall, bounce off it and go OK. Now we have to do the next part, which is to set the tank so that it goes up and backwards and forwards. I'm going to use a couple of different things in here. We're going to set it up so that when we're going to use, instead of just stopping the tank, we're going to use friction to slow it down. This gives it an effect of just slowing down a bit more quickly, but it doesn't instantly stop. And I'm going to use the key releases. So I'll use the key press to make it move forward and the key release to stop. Let's add an event. Let's start off with a key release event. Let's start off with the up, which will make it move forward. And so when the key release is up, I'm going to say under the move tab, I'll just set my friction and I'll set it to 1. Okay, now that will slow down until it stops. Let's set my key press event now, key press up this time. Now because we've got friction already set to 1 as soon as we release the key, we need to reset our friction back to 0. So that's the first thing. We'll set my friction back to 0. The next thing I do is I need to set the tank so that it has a maximum speed. And I'm going to do that by setting a control called, I'm going to use my speed that I set up in my original create thing. I had my variable speed as 0. I'm going to say if my speed is greater than 5 or 6 or something like that, if the variable speed is greater than 6 or equal to 6, I want you to stop this event. In other words, just keep it going at 6. Otherwise, set my variable speed to 1 relative. Now let's see what this is actually doing. So it's coming along, it slows down, it's got 0 friction, so it can go forward, and it says if your speed is greater than 6, stop accelerating or stop moving, stop getting faster, because the main event is to say set their variable speed to 1 relative. In other words, it starts off at 1, then goes to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it does that very quickly. And as soon as I release the key, the friction kicks in at 1 and it slows the tank down. Let's do the same thing for the reverse key. I'm going to go a key release. This time I'm going to go down. I'm going to set my friction to 1, so it will stop, and I'll add a key press for down. Now I'm basically a pretty lazy person, so I'm going to click on the press up here, hold the shift button, click on one of them, hold the shift button down, do a right click. I'm going to copy them, go to my down key and paste them in. But of course what I have to do is change everything to go backwards. So if the speed's 6, I want the actual value to be -6, so we're going backwards. Otherwise, set the variable speed to -1. So this time we're going backwards. Well, we should probably test this out and see if this works. So let's try this in our tank and see if we actually do go forwards and backwards as expected. Sometimes it does, sometimes it, oh look at that, going forward with my up key, backwards, turning round. Now if I go forwards, watch what happens if I tap the left or right keys. Okay, that's to tap the right key, the left key, so I can steer my tank. I can go backwards. As I go backwards I can steer it, or if I go forwards I can also steer it and go wherever I want. So that's working quite nicely. The next trick is to get the tank firing a bullet. So this shouldn't be too hard, and let's look at how we might do that. Well, I'm going to use the space bar to do a bullet, so I'm going to do a key press event of the space bar, and at that point what I want it to do is to create an instance of the object bullet, and I'm going to create a moving instance of the object bullet, which is the little create thing with a little arrow, and I'm going to choose bullet. My XY are going to leave as 0 because I want them to be created right where the tank is. The speed, I'll make the bullet say go about 8, and the direction I'm going to set as direction, and I'm going to choose relative. That's talking about the position of the bullet relative to the tank. So it should work. Let's test this out. Okay, and look at that, it's firing in the direction I want. A couple of other small adjustments I can make here. I'll go to my object bullet. If I give it a depth of 10, it should sit behind the tank. And I can also do things like press my space. Now my space bar is doing a lot of firing. I can actually slow that up using things called alarms. I I'll just quickly show you how to do that. What I need to do is actually I need to add an alarm event. I'll choose alarm 2. Alarm 1 seems to give me a bit of grief. Now that's just to say to the tank, you've got an alarm event. In the create event, I'm going to add one more variable, and I'm going to call that reload, and I'll give it a value of 20, so we've got quite a reasonable amount of time to reload. And in the space bar, what I'm going to do is going to say to the tank, right, we're going to test a few things here. First of all, I'll drag that into there. I'm going to test to see if the alarm, now I'm going to use the square brackets 2 is less than or equal to 1. In other words, the alarm's counting down. If the alarm's less than or equal to 1, here's what I need you to do. Start a block. I need you to create an instance of the moving bullet, and then I need you to set the alarm to reload, and that will be alarm 2, and we'll put one closeout block. I just need to check that I've set. So if alarm 2 is less than 1, in other words it's counting down, create an object bullet and set your alarm 2 to 0 to reload and start the countdown again. One other thing I might do in my object bullet is I might add an event there, a collision event. When I collide with the wall, destroy the bullet. That's kind of important because it can it can end up with a lot of objects outside of the room that a game maker's trying to keep track of. You need to destroy them when they collide with rooms or objects or whenever you want to get rid of them. Let's just see if that works. So I can tap away here, and my alarm is not working. Fantastic. What have I done wrong? Set reload to 20. Yes. Alarm 2, we're just going to say, I'll just put a comment in there. Sets an alarm for tank. Okay. The spacebar, if alarm 2 is less than 1, create an imaging instance of the bullet in the direction and set alarm 2 to reload. Why is it not working? Aha, that's not working. So one of the things that you do have to do, and this is something I do forget, you need to put an action, even if it's just a comment, because without having an action inside the event, it ignores the event. So a comment inside the action will allow the alarm to work. And we've just actually created a tank and shown it how to fire in any direction that we want. So thank you very much.